So for my last sermon, I thought I'd talk about something new. Many of you know that Article 2 of our Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws was just voted for a change from our principles to values and covenant statements. So let me talk a little bit about that as I also say goodbye. Section 2 of Article 2 of the bylaws of our Unitarian Universalist Association now begins. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant, congregation to congregation, and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. A foundation of love, a spiritual discipline of love. That's not some airy idea of love, not some cartoon hearts in the eyes love. This is a solid base for our beliefs, our ethics, our actions. This is something that requires practice. Love as a spiritual discipline. As I leave you, this is what I wish for you: a foundation of love, a spiritual discipline of love. As Unitarian Universalist congregation, you have a heritage of freedom, reason, hope, and courage that has been built on a foundation of love. This is your heritage, and you are this time's builders, whose role it is to build upon and pass on that heritage. We keep putting things into new words for new times. I'll go back a bit. 19th century Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing said it like this: I call that mind free which masters the senses and which recognizes its own reality and greatness, which passes life not in asking what it shall eat or drink, but in hungering, thirsting, and seeking after righteousness. I call that mind free which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith, which opens itself to light whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. I call that mind free which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse, which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite spirit and in them finds help to its own spiritual enlightenment. I call that mind free which protects itself against the usurpations of society and which does not cower to human opinion, which refuses to be the slave or tool of the many or of the few and guards its empire over itself as nobler than the empire of the world. I call that mind free which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past nor live on its old virtues, but which listens for new and higher monitions of conscience and rejoices to pour itself forth in fresh and higher exertions. I call that mind free which sets no bounds to its love, which wherever they are seen delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering, which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and offers itself up a willing sacrifice to the cause of humankind. I call that mind free which has cast off all fear but that of wrongdoing, and which no menace or peril can enthrall, which is calm in the midst of tumults and possesses itself, though all else be lost. I call that mind free, which sets no bounds to its love, which wherever they are seen delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering. This is a foundation of love, a spiritual discipline of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are interdependence, pluralism, justice, transformation, generosity, and equity. You have the flower on the front of your order of service with love at the center and those shared values. Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. This is the new phrasing of what was our seventh principle. We covenant to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Our new values and covenant statements puts into words what covenant to affirm and promote may look like. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. The value of interdependence. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. This is the new wording for what I would say were our first, third, and fourth principles. We covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, and a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Our new values and covenant statement uses some of these words in the covenant statement connected to this value, pluralism. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. As Channing put it in the 19th century, I call that mind free which sets no bounds to its love, which wherever they are seen delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering, which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children and offers itself up a willing sacrifice to the cause of humankind. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. That where all thrive emphasizes the justice. This is the new wording of what was our fifth principle. We covenant to affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. And it also encompasses the eighth principle, which was not adopted by the UUA, but was adopted by many, many individual congregations. We covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. The covenant statement connected with this value, justice, includes some of the previous language. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. The next value is transformation. We adapt to the changing world. This value does not directly relate back to one of our previous principles from the 1980s. We have to look at them every 15 years, but when we looked at them 15 years back, we didn't change them. So we've had these for about 30 some years, the ones that we just changed. But its tenet, the tenet of transformation, is basic to who we are. To go back to Channing's words, I call that mind free which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith. I call that mind free which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, nor live on its old virtues, but which listens for new and higher monitions of conscience, and rejoices to pour itself forth in fresh and higher exertions. The covenant statement that goes with this value says, we covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. An early 20th century Universalist minister, when asked where Universalists stood, answered by saying, "We don't stand, we march." That's perhaps a bit too military an image for me, but I like the point. We are not content to stand still and never question. We are ready and willing to move if convinced of new truths. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. This value also does not relate directly back to one of our 1980s principles, but it goes back further than that. It reflects some of the wording of our transcendentalist forebears on self-culture. In a sermon from 2005, Janie Rosenkrantz said, self-culture then referred to the cultivation of the soul in individuals. In his address on self-culture, William Ellery Channing defined it by writing, to cultivate anything, be it a plant, an animal, a mind, is to make it grow. Growth, expansion is the end. The one, therefore, who does what one can to unfold all one's powers of capacities, especially one's nobler ones, so as to become a well-proportioned, vigorous, excellent, happy being, practices self-culture. The Transcendentalists believed in a process of lifelong spiritual growth. In her memoirs, Margaret Fuller acknowledged this process when she wrote, "Very early I knew that the only object in life was to grow. I was often false to this knowledge, in idolatries of particular objects or impatient longings for happiness, but I have never lost sight of it, have always been controlled by it, and this first gift of love has never been superseded by a later love." In his essay, The Roots of Unitarian Universalist Spirituality in New England Transcendentalism, Dr. Barry Andrews writes, the experiments at Walden Pond, Brook Farm, Fruitlands, and even Emerson's dinner table, where the servants were invited to eat with their employers, were attempts at reforming individuals in their personal and domestic lives. Typically, the Transcendentalists began with the self in their reform efforts, believing that it is through the agency of individuals that political change and social transformation are brought about. They aimed at setting an example of principled behavior whenever crucial moral issues like slavery were involved. There must be, quote, some absolute goodness somewhere, Thoreau declared in his essay on civil disobedience, for that will leaven the whole lump. Furthermore, actions from principle was, quote, essentially revolutionary and would have profound effects on the attitudes and the behavior of the majority. The ethical consequences of their transcendentalist ideals impelled them into a wide variety of causes and reforms. The educational reforms of Bronson Alcott and Elizabeth Peabody, the Christian socialism of William Henry Channing, Margaret Fuller's feminism and involvement in the Roman Revolution of 1848, Thoreau's civil disobedience, George Ripley's Brook Farm, abolitionism, and women's rights. These were not accidents or deviations, but logical consequences of the transcendentalist social ethic. They were the inevitable outcome of a belief in a common human nature and the desire to integrate spiritual aspirations and moral behavior. Transcendentalism, for all its emphasis on spirituality, led its adherents into the world more often than away from it. Our new covenant statement, connected to this value, generosity, states we covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. It is this generosity that grows love. Let each other into your lives, into your hopes, into your dreams. Be generous in what you share of yourselves. That sharing is necessary to the creation of beloved community, and it is that sharing that often impels the growth, the culture of the soul. The next value is equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. You might say that our current value statements on generosity and equity flesh out what was our sixth principle. We covenant to affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. The covenant statement connected to the value of equity states, we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. It obviously also relates back to that eighth principle. We covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. An 18th century universalist, George de Benneville, put it like this: the spirit of love will be intensified to godly proportions when reciprocal love exists between the entire human race and each of its individual members. That love must be based upon mutual respect for the differences in color, language, and worship. The words of our values and covenant statements may be new to us, but the ideas contained there have been growing from our beginnings. Unitarian Universalist minister Carl Seaberg said of a prior Universalist, what Clarence Russell Skinner was doing for his time and challenging us to do for our time is to continually reshape the congregations that we inherit, whether as ministers or as lay people, so that they can face up to the new challenges and opportunities of the days that lie ahead. We must continue the kind of work that Skinner made central to his life's ministry, always building a new kind of congregation, always reaching out for a vision of the congregation that lies just beyond our grasp, but with hard, dedicated work can be conjured into being. This is my wish for you as I tell you to farewell as I leave you. Stand firm on a foundation of love. Cultivate your souls with a spiritual discipline of love. Honor your heritage of freedom, reason, hope, and courage as you live out your values centered in love. I end with words from American feminist theologian and Episcopal priest Carter Haywood. For after all, we Unitarian Universalists don't have to stick to just quoting Unitarians and Universalists. She writes, "We are not automatic lovers of self, others, world, or God. Love does not just happen. We are not love machines, puppets on the strings of a deity called love. Love is a choice, not simply or necessarily a rational choice, but rather a willingness to be present to others without pretense or guile. Love is the conversion to humanity, a willingness to participate with others in the healing of a broken world and broken lives. Love is the choice to experience life as a member of the human family, a partner in the dance of life, rather than as an alien in the world or as a deity above the world, aloof and apart from human flesh." And I say as I leave you, when faced with a choice, choose love. Thank you.